My fiance demands that I let his family move into my inherited apartments rent-free because we are family. So I pulled off the ring and gave it back to him. Christopher and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. He knew my father passed away last year, but I'd never discussed the specifics of my inheritance. Dad had built his portfolio slowly over the course of 30 years, buying distressed properties and renovating them. I'd helped him manage them since high school, learning about tenants, maintenance, and market rates. When he died, he left me 6 fully paid apartments generating $12,000 monthly in rental income. I didn't tell Christopher because money had never been part of our relationship. We split everything equally, lived modestly in my condo, and planned a simple wedding. I wanted to be sure he loved me, not my assets. The apartments were my safety net, my father's legacy, and honestly, none of his business until we were married. Then last month, Christopher's friend Evan saw me at one of the properties handling a maintenance issue. Evan knew the building, knew the units went for $2,000 each, and immediately told Christopher he'd seen me there. Christopher confronted me that night. "Do you own property? Why didn't you tell me?" I explained about my father, the inheritance, and wanting to keep finances separate until marriage. His entire demeanor changed. 6 apartments? That's like, what, $12,000 a month? You've been sitting on that while we've been planning a budget wedding? I reminded him he'd wanted the budget wedding, said big weddings were wasteful, but now his tune changed completely. "We could have a real celebration," he said. "Open bar, destination venue, the works." That's when I knew I'd made the right choice keeping quiet. But it got worse. 2 days later, Christopher sat me down with a whole presentation. He'd figured out how to optimize my property income. His mother Darlene was struggling with rent in her overpriced 1-bedroom. His brother Tony had just divorced and needed a fresh start. His sister Rachel was trying to save money for law school. If they moved into 3 of my apartments, rent-free temporarily, it would help the whole family get ahead. I stared at him. "You want me to evict paying tenants to house your family for free?" "Not evict," he corrected. "Just non-renew some leases. 3 units are up for renewal in the next 2 months. Instead of re-signing those tenants, we could help family." "Those tenants have lived there for years," I said. "Mrs. Smith is 78. The Johnsons just had a baby. Rob just started his business. You'd displace them for your family?" He got defensive. "They'd find other places. My family needs this more. Besides, when we're married, your property becomes our property. We should be making these decisions together." Actually, I corrected, inherited assets remain separate property after marriage unless specifically commingled. I'd already consulted a lawyer about protecting my father's legacy. Christopher's face went red. "You've been planning to keep this from me even after marriage? That's not a partnership. That's selfish." His mother called me the next day. Darlene had always been pushy, but this was next level. "Christopher tells me you have empty apartments just sitting there while family struggles. That's not very Christian of you." "They're not empty," I explained. "I have tenants who pay rent. That's how investment properties work." She huffed. "We'll be family soon. Real family helps each other. I'd only need it for a year or 2. Tony would probably need longer, and Rachel just until she finishes school. So indefinitely," I translated. 3 units generating $6,000 monthly. Gone. $72,000 a year in lost income. That's not help, Darlene. That's bankruptcy." She called me greedy and hung up. Christopher came home furious. His mother was crying. His siblings were disappointed. How could I be so heartless? That's when his sister Rachel texted me directly. She didn't want the apartment, hadn't asked for it, and was embarrassed by the whole situation. But Tony had already started packing, assuming it was a done deal. And Darlene had told her entire church group about her future daughter-in-law's generous gift. The next morning, Christopher brought his family to my condo. They wanted to see the property listings, discuss move-in dates, talk about which units suited their needs, like it was already decided. I stood up and addressed all of them. "These apartments are not available. They're occupied by paying tenants who I will not displace. They were my father's life work, and I will not dishonor his memory by turning them into free housing for people who feel entitled to them." "But we're getting married," Christopher said. "What's yours becomes mine." "No," I replied. "We're not getting married." I pulled off the engagement ring and set it on the table. Darlene started shrieking about selfishness and greed. Tony called me a gold digger, which was ironic since I was the one with gold and they were trying to dig into it. Christopher said I'd regret this, that I'd never find someone who loved me like he did. They left. But 2 days later, I received a text message from one of the tenants asking why I am evicting her. I stare at the text message from Mrs. Smith, my hands actually shaking as I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words don't change. She's asking why I'm evicting her, using that exact word, evicting. My stomach drops because I haven't sent any eviction notices to anyone. I haven't even thought about not renewing leases. The timing hits me like a slap. 2 days after I ended my engagement with Christopher. 2 days after his family left my condo, furious that I wouldn't give them free apartments. This can't be coincidental. My fingers fumble with the phone as I pull up Mrs. Smith's contact and hit call. She answers on the second ring, her voice thin and worried. I force myself to sound calm even though my heart is racing. I tell her I didn't send any eviction notice, that something is very wrong here, and I need to see whatever letter she received. She sounds confused but agrees to wait for me. I ask her please not to do anything or talk to anyone until I can come look at the notice in person. She says okay. Her voice still shaky, and I'm already grabbing my keys. I make the drive to Mrs. Smith's building in under an hour, hitting every yellow light and probably breaking a few traffic laws. My mind is spinning through possibilities, but I keep coming back to Christopher and his entitled family. Mrs. Smith meets me at her apartment door, wringing her hands, and the worry on her face makes me feel sick. She's 78 years old and she's lived in this building for 6 years, always pays rent on time, keeps her place immaculate. She hands me a single sheet of paper and my breath catches. It's printed on what looks exactly like my business letterhead. complete with my logo and contact information. The letter states her lease won't be renewed and she needs to vacate within 30 days. I scan down to the signature and my jaw clenches. It's supposed to be my signature, but it's completely wrong, like someone traced it badly or copied it from something. The language in the letter is also off, too formal and using terms I would never use. But I can see how it would fool someone, especially an elderly woman who wouldn't know my actual signature. I look up at Mrs. Smith and apologize over and over. This is fake, I tell her. Someone is pretending to be me. I promise her she's not being evicted. Her lease is fine, and I need to keep this letter as evidence while I figure out who did this. Back at my condo, I boot up my laptop and immediately check my property management software. I go through every access log, every login attempt, every change made in the past month. Nothing unusual. My email accounts show the same thing. No unauthorized access, no sent messages I didn't write, no forwarded emails. The security is intact, which means whoever created that fake letter didn't hack my systems. They had to physically make it and deliver it somehow. That takes effort and planning. Someone printed fake letterhead, forged my signature, and either mailed it or hand-delivered it to Mrs. Smith's apartment. My stomach churns as I realize this could be bigger than one letter. I grab my phone and pull up my tenant contact list. I text the Johnsons first, asking if they received any unusual mail from me recently. Then I text Rob with the same question. My hands are steadier now, but my mind won't stop racing through worst-case scenarios. Rob texts back almost immediately. Yes, he got a letter yesterday that seemed weird. He says he figured he'd call me Monday to discuss it since the whole thing felt off. My heart sinks further. The Johnsons replied 2 minutes later, confirming they also received a similar letter. Now I'm actually panicking because I don't know how widespread this is. I have 6 buildings with multiple units each. How many of my tenants got these fake eviction notices? I spend the next 2 hours systematically calling every single tenant across all my properties. Some don't answer, so I leave voicemails asking them to call me back urgently. The ones who do answer sound confused by my question, and I have to explain that fraudulent notices might be circulating. Each call makes me more angry and more scared. This isn't just harassment. This is someone actively trying to sabotage my rental income and destroy the tenant relationships my father spent 30 years building. By evening, I've confirmed that 5 tenants total received the fake notices. Mrs. Smith, the Johnsons, Rob, and 2 others from different buildings. I pull up my lease renewal schedule on my laptop and my blood goes cold. All 5 of these tenants have leases coming up for renewal in the next 60 days. This isn't random. This isn't someone just trying to scare me or cause general chaos. This is calculated, targeted harassment designed to cause maximum disruption at the exact moment when those leases would normally be renewed. If these tenants believe they're being evicted, they'll start looking for new places. They might move out. I could lose 5 paying tenants, $5,000 in monthly income, because of these fake letters. The pattern is so obvious it makes me want to scream. Christopher knew exactly which units were coming up for renewal, because I'd mentioned it during his stupid presentation about housing his family. He or someone in his family is deliberately targeting those specific tenants to sabotage my business and force me into financial trouble. I grab my phone and start taking photos of all the fake letters I've collected. I photograph the letterhead, the forged signatures, the dates, everything. Then I create a new folder on my laptop labeled Evidence and start documenting everything. Date each tenant received their letter, which building they're in, when their lease renewal is scheduled. I type up a timeline starting from when Christopher's friend Evan saw me at the property, through the broken engagement, to now. My hands are steadier with this concrete task. The anger is still there, but I'm channeling it into organized documentation instead of just spinning in panic. I draft an email to all my tenants explaining that fraudulent eviction notices are being distributed by someone impersonating me. I make it clear that any real communication from me will come through certified mail or through our property portal with proper authentication. I explain I'm pursuing legal action against whoever is behind this. Before I send it, I add that I'm available by phone if anyone has concerns or questions. Sunday morning comes and I haven't slept well. I kept waking up thinking about what other ways Christopher might try to sabotage me. I need to talk to someone who isn't involved in this mess. Someone who will give me honest advice without any agenda. I call Laurel Wade, my friend since college who has always been straightforward with me. She answers on the 3rd ring and I ask if she can come over. She hears something in my voice because she doesn't ask questions, just says she'll bring coffee and bagels. When she arrives 30 minutes later, I'm sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by printed documents and my laptop. She sets down the coffee and bagels and sits across from me. I tell her everything. The engagement ending, Christopher's demands for free housing, his family showing up at my condo, and now these fake eviction notices targeting my tenants. She listens without interrupting, her expression getting more serious as I talk. When I finish, she's quiet for a moment. Then she says, I need to get a lawyer involved before this gets worse. I know she's right, but the thought of legal fees on top of everything else makes me want to cry. Laurel pulls out her phone and starts searching for landlord-tenant attorneys in our area. She's always been practical like this, moving straight to solutions instead of dwelling on problems. We find Jillian Ramirez, who has excellent reviews and specializes in property owner rights and harassment cases. Her office is closed since it's Sunday, but there's an emergency contact number. I leave a detailed voicemail explaining who I am, what's happening with the fake eviction notices, and that I need an emergency consultation as soon as possible, preferably Monday morning. I give her my callback number and email address. After I hang up, Laurel makes me eat a bagel and drink some coffee. She tells me I'm doing the right things, documenting everything and getting professional help. Having a concrete plan of action helps me feel slightly less panicked. That night, I sleep a little better, though I still wake up twice, worried about what other sabotage might be coming. Monday morning at 9, I'm sitting in Jillian Ramirez's office on the 3rd floor of a building downtown. Her assistant called me back Sunday evening and scheduled this emergency consultation. The office is professional but not fancy, with law books lining one wall and a desk covered in organized file folders. Jillian is maybe 45, with dark hair pulled back and sharp eyes that make me feel like she's already analyzing everything. I spread out the fake eviction notices on her desk, along with my printed timeline and documentation of Christopher's family demanding free housing. I walk her through the whole situation, starting with my father's death and the inheritance, through the engagement ending, to receiving Mrs. Smith's text 2 days later. She listens carefully, taking notes in neat handwriting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finish, she sets down her pen and looks at me. She says this is definitely harassment and possibly criminal impersonation depending on how the notices were distributed. Her calm, professional tone makes me feel less crazy for being so worried about this. Jillian outlines a 3-part strategy while I take notes on my phone. First, send cease and desist letters to Christopher and his family members, specifically his mother and brother, warning them that any further contact or harassment will result in legal action. Second, file a police report about the fraudulent notices since forging someone's signature and impersonating a property owner could be criminal. Third, prepare documentation for a possible restraining order if the harassment continues or escalates. She also recommends I send official letters to all my tenants clarifying the situation, reassuring them about their lease status, and offering a small rent credit for the stress and confusion caused. Maybe $50 per affected tenant, she suggests. It's a gesture of good faith that shows I take their concerns seriously. The plan feels solid and actionable. My hands have stopped shaking for the first time since I got Mrs. Smith's text. The panic that's been building in my chest for days finally starts to quiet down, because I have professional guidance and a clear path forward, instead of just reacting to attacks. I sign the paperwork authorizing Jillian to send the cease and desist letters to Christopher, Darlene, and Tony. The retainer fee is $1,500, which makes my stomach hurt, but I hand over my credit card anyway. Jillian explains the letters will go out via certified mail tomorrow, requiring signatures so we have proof they received them. She schedules my police appointment for Tuesday morning at 9, and gives me her cell number in case anything urgent happens before then. Walking out of her office, I feel lighter than I have in days, like someone finally believes me and knows how to fight back. The afternoon sun is bright when I get to my car, and I sit there for a minute just breathing before I drive home. Back at my condo, I spread the fake eviction notices across my dining table and really look at them. The letterhead is almost perfect, my business logo and contact information copied exactly from my website. But the paper quality is wrong, too thin and slightly off-white instead of the bright white cardstock I use for official letters. I hold one up to the light and see the printer lines, the kind you get from a home inkjet printer, not the laser printer at my office supply store. The signature is terrible up close, shaky and uncertain, nothing like my actual handwriting. I take photos of every detail with my phone, then write up my observations in an email to Jillian with all the pictures attached. These small details might help prove who made them. I open my laptop and start drafting a letter to my tenants. It takes me 3 tries to get the tone right, professional but personal, explaining without oversharing. The letter says fraudulent eviction notices were sent by someone impersonating me. No real evictions are happening. All current leases remain valid, and anyone who got a fake notice will receive a $50 rent credit next month. I calculate quickly in my head. 5 tenants times $50 equals $250, which hurts but is necessary. Tenant trust is everything in this business, and Dad always said a good reputation is worth more than quick profits. I upload the letter to my property management portal and send it to all tenants across all 6 buildings, then print physical copies to mail so there's absolutely no confusion about what's real and what's fake. Tuesday morning, I'm at the police station at 8:45, sitting in a plastic chair in the waiting area clutching my folder of evidence. The officer who calls me back is maybe 30, with tired eyes and a name tag that says Anderson. I follow him to a small desk in the open office area, not a private room, and he pulls out a form while I explain everything. I show him the fake eviction notices, my real business letterhead for comparison, and walk through the timeline starting with breaking off my engagement and ending with 5 tenants getting fraudulent letters 2 days later. Anderson listens carefully and types notes into his computer, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates and names. He explains this could be criminal impersonation or fraud, both serious charges, but they need to investigate before determining what charges fit and who's responsible. Anderson asks if I have direct proof Christopher or his family sent the letters, and I have to admit I don't. I explain the timing, the motive, the fact that Christopher knew which tenants had leases ending soon, but it's all circumstantial. He writes down that I suspect Christopher Watts, Darlene Watts, and Tony Watts, based on recent conflict over my rental properties, and he notes the pattern is suspicious. But when he says they'll follow up and investigate, his tone tells me this isn't urgent compared to violent crimes and active emergencies. I leave the station with a case number and copies of my police report, feeling frustrated that the legal system can't move faster when someone is actively trying to destroy my business. The drive home feels longer than it should, and I keep checking my phone for more bad news. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. The man identifies himself as Alden Sears from the city housing department, and my heart immediately drops into my stomach. He says a complaint was filed about unsafe conditions and improper eviction procedures at my properties, specifically the building where Mrs. Smith lives. I know my buildings are safe. I know I haven't evicted anyone, which means this is Christopher attacking from another angle. Alden's voice is professional but not unkind as he explains he needs to do an inspection, and we schedule it for Friday morning at 10. I agree to meet him there with all my maintenance records and lease documentation. After I hang up, I sit on my couch staring at the wall for 10 minutes, trying to process how many different ways Christopher is coming after me. Wednesday evening, I pull out every file cabinet in my home office and start gathering documentation. Dad taught me to keep copies of everything: inspection reports going back years, maintenance logs with dates and contractor names, signed lease agreements for every tenant, rent payment records showing consistent on-time payments, email threads about repairs and requests. I organize everything into categories, creating clearly labeled folders for each building and each type of record. Thursday, I take off work from my day job and spend 8 hours at my dining table sorting papers, making sure I can quickly find any document Alden might ask for. My father's voice is in my head the whole time, reminding me that good records protect you when problems come. By Thursday evening, I have 2 massive binders organized by building and topic, everything indexed and tabbed. My hands ache from the paper cuts and my eyes hurt from reading small print, but I feel ready. Thursday night, Laurel shows up at my door with wine and finds me still surrounded by paperwork even though the binders are done. She takes one look at my face and gives me a long hug before pouring us both a glass. I tell her about the housing inspection on Friday, about how scared I am that Alden will find something wrong even though I know the buildings are good. Laurel sits next to me on the couch and reminds me that I do everything right. My tenants are happy, the buildings are well maintained, and the inspection will prove the complaint is baseless. Her confidence helps settle the panic in my chest. We order pizza and she helps me do one final check of my documentation, making sure I have everything organized and accessible. By the time she leaves at 11, I feel less alone and slightly more ready to face tomorrow. Friday morning, I arrive at Mrs. Smith's building at 9:30, giving myself time to set up before Alden gets there. I bring both binders, my laptop with digital records, and my phone with photos of recent maintenance work. Alden arrives exactly at 10, a man in his 50s wearing khakis and a polo shirt with the city logo. He's polite and professional as he introduces himself and explains he'll be checking the building systems, safety features, and overall maintenance. We start in the basement where he inspects the water heater, electrical panel, and foundation. I provide documentation for every system, showing inspection dates and maintenance schedules. He takes notes on a tablet and occasionally asks questions, which I answer while showing him the relevant paperwork. We work our way through the building for 2 hours, checking smoke detectors in every unit, testing plumbing fixtures, examining electrical outlets, looking at structural elements, reviewing the roof condition. Alden is thorough but fair, clearly knowing what he's looking for and not trying to create problems where none exist. Mrs. Smith is home when we knock on her door and she invites us in immediately. While Alden checks her smoke detector and water pressure, she tells him unprompted that I'm an excellent landlord who fixed her leaky faucet within 2 days and always responds quickly to any problems. She says the building is the best maintained place she's lived in 40 years of renting. Alden notes her comments on his tablet, and I see him glance at me with what might be respect. After 2 hours, we're standing in the building lobby, and Alden is reviewing his notes. He tells me the buildings are actually in better condition than most rental properties he inspects, everything up to code and well-maintained. He found some minor gaps in my documentation system. Nothing serious, but areas where I could improve my record-keeping for future inspections. I thank him for being thorough and professional, then ask what happens with the complaint that started this whole inspection. Alden says he'll file a report noting the complaint was unfounded and appears to be malicious given the lack of any actual violations. He can't tell me who filed the complaint due to privacy rules, but the look he gives me suggests he understands what's really happening here. I shake his hand and watch him drive away, feeling validated but also angry that I had to spend 2 days and massive stress defending myself against lies. I get in my car and start the 20-minute drive back to my condo, gripping the steering wheel tight enough that my knuckles turn white. The inspection went fine, better than fine actually, but I'm so mad I could scream. 2 whole days of stress, gathering every piece of paper I own, worrying about what Alden might find, and it was all because someone filed a fake complaint to mess with me. Christopher and his family are attacking my business from every angle they can think of. The fake eviction letters weren't enough, so now they're trying to get the city involved, hoping some inspector will find a problem that doesn't exist. I pull into my parking spot and sit in the car for a minute, taking deep breaths and trying to calm down before I go inside. Then I grab my phone and call Jillian, needing to tell her about this latest attack. She answers on the second ring and I explain the whole inspection, how Alden found nothing wrong, how he even said the buildings are in better shape than most places he sees. Jillian asks if Alden mentioned the complaint seemed fake, and I tell her yes. He said it appears to be mean-spirited, and he'll note that in his report. She tells me this actually helps our case for a restraining order, because it shows a clear pattern of harassment through multiple channels, not just one angry action but a whole campaign to damage my business and stress me out. I feel a tiny bit better knowing this evidence strengthens our position, but I'm still furious that I had to deal with it at all. Saturday morning, I wake up and check my email while drinking coffee, a normal routine that gets interrupted when I see a message from my property management portal. The subject line says security alert and my stomach drops before I even open it. Someone tried to log into my account from an unfamiliar IP address multiple times last night, starting around midnight and continuing until 3 in the morning. The login attempts all failed because I have 2-factor authentication turned on, so they couldn't actually get in. But seeing the list of failed attempts makes my hands shake. 15 different tries over 3 hours. Someone sitting at their computer or phone trying over and over to break into my system. I know exactly who it is, or at least who's behind it, even if they're using some trick to hide their location. I immediately change my password to something completely random and different from anything I've used before. Then I turn on every extra security setting the portal offers. I download the access logs showing all the failed login attempts with timestamps and IP addresses. Then I forward the whole thing to Jillian with a note explaining what happened. Then I send the same information to the police officer who took my report about the fake eviction letters, adding it to the case file. My coffee is cold by the time I finish, and my peaceful Saturday morning is completely ruined. I spend the rest of Saturday and all day Sunday researching cybersecurity for small business owners and property managers. I find articles about password managers, two-factor authentication, security questions, and protecting against hacking attempts. I learned that I should use completely unique passwords for every single system I access, not variations of the same password like I've been doing. I download a password manager app and spend hours setting it up, creating new random passwords for my property portal, my email, my banking, my maintenance scheduling system, and every other account related to my business. Then I go through and change all my security questions to fake answers that only I would know, because apparently people can figure out your mother's maiden name or your first pet's name from social media. I set up alerts so I'll get notified immediately if anyone tries to log into any of my accounts from a new device or location. The whole process takes most of the weekend and leaves me mentally exhausted. This feels like a part-time job on top of actually managing my properties and dealing with tenant needs and handling normal maintenance issues. I'm tired and frustrated and sick of spending all my time and energy defending myself against Christopher's attacks instead of just living my life. But I'm also determined not to let him win by overwhelming me or making me give up on my father's legacy. Monday morning, my phone rings at 9 and it's Jillian calling with an update. She tells me the cease and desist letters were delivered to Christopher, Darlene, and Tony via certified mail over the weekend, and all three of them signed for their letters. I feel a small flutter of hope that maybe this will finally make them stop, that seeing official legal warnings will scare them into backing off. But Jillian warns me not to get my hopes up too much because we'll probably see one of two responses soon. Either they'll realize they're facing real legal consequences and stop the harassment, or they'll escalate because they're angry about being threatened. She tells me to be ready for either possibility and to keep documenting everything that happens. I thank her for the update and promise to call immediately if anything else occurs. After we hang up, I sit at my kitchen table feeling like I made some progress by getting those letters sent, but I'm not foolish enough to think this is over. Christopher has shown me exactly who he is over the past few weeks, and people like that don't usually back down just because a lawyer sends them a letter. That same afternoon, my phone buzzes with a text message and I see Christopher's name on the screen. My heart starts racing before I even read what it says. The message is long and his tone is so condescending I can practically hear his voice saying the words. He claims he has no idea what I'm talking about with these fake eviction notices and housing complaints, suggesting I'm being paranoid and dramatic about normal stress that happens after breakups. He writes that I'm clearly not handling the end of our relationship well, and I should maybe talk to someone about my mental state, instead of making false accusations against his family. The gaslighting is so obvious and gross that I want to throw my phone across the room. He's literally violating the cease and desist instruction to only communicate through lawyers, and he's doing it to tell me I'm crazy for thinking he's harassing me. I don't respond to the message at all, even though every part of me wants to tell him exactly what I think of his manipulation tactics. Instead, I take screenshots of the entire text conversation, making sure the timestamp and his number are clearly visible. Then I forward the images to Jillian with a note that he's already breaking the rules. She responds within minutes saying this is perfect evidence that he can't follow legal instructions, and it will help if we need to file for a restraining order. Tuesday morning, I'm scrolling through Facebook during breakfast, when I see a post from Darlene that makes my blood boil. She doesn't use my name directly, but she writes a long rant about how her son's ex-fiance is making false accusations and trying to destroy their family's reputation with lies and legal threats. She goes on about how some people can't handle breakups like adults, and instead they lash out and try to hurt innocent people who were only trying to help. The post has dozens of comments from her church friends all agreeing with her and saying how terrible it is when bitter women attack good Christian families. I feel sick reading it because several of my tenants are friends with me on Facebook and they're definitely going to see this. Sure enough, within an hour, I get messages from 2 different tenants asking if everything is okay with the properties and if there's something they should know about. I reassure them both that the properties are stable and well-maintained and that someone is spreading false information about me because of a personal conflict. They both seem satisfied with that answer, but I can tell they're worried about whether their housing situation is secure. I call Jillian right away and tell her about Darlene's Facebook post, reading her the whole thing while my voice shakes with anger. I want to comment on the post and defend myself, want to tell everyone the truth about what Christopher and his family tried to do. But Jillian stops me before I can do anything. She says responding on social media or engaging with Darlene's story at all would be a huge mistake, because it would just create more drama and give Darlene more attention. Instead, Jillian says she'll draft a second cease and desist letter, specifically to Darlene addressing the social media harassment, and warning that continued posts will result in us filing for a restraining order. She explains that we need to handle this through proper legal channels, not through Facebook arguments. I hate that I can't defend myself publicly, hate feeling like Darlene gets to spread lies while I have to stay quiet. But I trust Jillian's advice more than my emotional impulse to fight back, so I agree to let her handle it professionally. Wednesday brings the first good news I've had in a while when I get a text from Rachel apologizing for her family's behavior. She says not everyone in the Watts family thinks I was wrong to protect my inheritance and keep my boundaries. She mentions that she's focusing on law school and trying to distance herself from the family drama. I read her message 3 times, feeling grateful that at least one person in that family has some sense and integrity. But I'm also cautious about trusting anyone connected to Christopher right now, even Rachel, who seems genuine. I text back thanking her for reaching out and wishing her well with school, keeping my response friendly but not too warm. I don't want to completely shut her out since she's been respectful and honest, but I also can't forget that she's Christopher's sister, and family loyalty might eventually win out over doing the right thing. I meet with Megan Hurley on Wednesday afternoon at a coffee shop near one of my properties to talk about how the other tenants are feeling. Megan has lived in my father's buildings for 12 years, and she knows most of the other long-term residents pretty well. She tells me that most people trust me and appreciate how I've been transparent about the fake eviction letters and the harassment situation. But she also says there's definitely some worry underneath that trust, people wondering if the properties are really stable or if there might be more problems coming. She suggests I think about hosting a casual tenant meeting where people can ask questions directly and feel more connected to what's happening. I realize this is actually a great idea because it would let me address concerns face-to-face instead of through individual emails or phone calls. Megan offers to help me organize it and spread the word to other tenants, and I accept her help gratefully. Thursday evening, I send out an invitation through the property portal to all my tenants, offering to host an optional gathering at the community room in one of the buildings. I promise pizza and an open forum where anyone can ask questions or share concerns about the properties. I make it clear that attendance is completely optional, and no one will be penalized for not coming. 8 tenants show up on Thursday night, including Mrs. Smith, the Johnsons with their baby, Rob, and Megan. I order 3 large pizzas and set out paper plates and napkins, trying to make it feel casual and friendly rather than like some formal business meeting. Once everyone has food, I stand up and explain the situation honestly, but without sharing too many personal details. I tell them someone has been harassing me because of a personal conflict, and that harassment included sending fake eviction notices to some tenants and filing false complaints about the properties. I reassure everyone that the buildings are stable and well-maintained, that no real evictions are planned, and that I'm taking legal action to stop the harassment. Then I open the floor for questions, and people ask about security measures, communication procedures, and what they should do if they receive any suspicious letters in the future. I answer everything as clearly as I can, and by the end of the meeting, I can see people relaxing and feeling more confident about their housing situation. Rob raises his hand and tells me he works in IT security, offering to help me check my digital systems for any weak spots that someone might use to break in. I accept immediately because I know my property management software probably has holes I don't even know about. The Johnsons mention they've been thinking about the fake letters and suggest I install security cameras at the building entrances to catch anyone delivering suspicious stuff in the future. I write that down in my phone notes because it's actually a smart idea I hadn't thought of yet. Megan adds that having cameras would make everyone feel safer too, knowing there's a record of who comes and goes. The meeting wraps up around 8:30, and people leave looking way more relaxed than when they arrived, several of them thanking me for being honest about everything. I clean up the pizza boxes and paper plates, feeling better than I have in days, because my tenants actually support me instead of believing whatever lies Christopher's family might spread. Friday morning, I call 3 different security companies to get quotes for camera installation at all 6 buildings. The first quote comes back at $11,000, and I almost choke on my coffee. The second is $9,000, the third is $10,000. I sit at my kitchen table staring at the numbers and doing math in my head about how many months of rental income this represents. But tenant safety matters more than the cost, and having video evidence if Christopher's family tries anything else could be important for legal reasons. I approve the middle quote and schedule installation for the following week, transferring money from my emergency fund to cover it. Rob texts me that evening asking when I'm free for him to look at my digital security setup. I invite him over at 7, and he shows up with his laptop and a whole toolkit of stuff I don't recognize. He spends 3 hours going through my property management software, my email accounts, my banking access, and my website backend. He finds 4 places where my security could be better, including weak passwords I've been using for years, and some settings that make it easier for someone to try breaking in. He walks me through fixing everything, setting up stronger passwords, adding extra verification steps, and changing settings to make my accounts harder to hack. I'm grateful for his help, and the reminder that my tenants are real people who care about this community my father spent 30 years building. Monday morning, I open my mailbox and find a thick envelope from a law firm I've never heard of. My stomach drops before I even open it because I know it's going to be bad news. Inside is a formal letter on fancy letterhead claiming Christopher hired them to pursue compensation for emotional distress caused by the broken engagement. They're demanding $15,000 for his suffering, therapy costs, and damage to his reputation. I read it twice to make sure I'm understanding correctly, then I actually laugh out loud because it's so ridiculous. Christopher broke up with me because I wouldn't give his family free apartments, and now he wants me to pay him for being upset about it. The letter threatens legal action if I don't respond within 10 days. I scan it with my phone and email it to Jillian before I've even finished my coffee. She responds in 45 minutes saying this is a frivolous threat with zero legal merit, but it actually helps our case for a restraining order because it shows ongoing harassment. She asks if I'm ready to move forward with filing for protection, and I type back yes immediately. Jillian files the petition for a temporary restraining order on Tuesday afternoon. She calls me that evening to explain what happens next. The court scheduled a hearing for the following week, where I'll need to testify about everything Christopher and his family have done since the engagement ended. She lists out the evidence we have piled up now: fake eviction notices to 5 tenants, false complaints to the housing department, attempted hacking of my accounts, violation of the cease and desist letter by contacting me directly, Darlene's Facebook posts, and now this stupid legal threat. Jillian sounds confident when she tells me we have a strong case, but I'm already nervous about having to face Christopher in court and talk about all of this in front of a judge. She reminds me to stick to facts, speak clearly, and not let his lawyer rattle me with questions. I spend the rest of the week trying not to think about the hearing too much. That week, I force myself to focus on normal property management work that got pushed aside during all the chaos. I process rent payments from all my tenants, schedule routine maintenance for 2 buildings that need gutter cleaning, review 3 lease renewals coming up next month, and respond to a maintenance request about a leaky faucet. The boring everyday tasks actually calm me down because they remind me that most of my business runs fine, despite Christopher trying to destroy it. My father built something solid over 30 years of careful work. It's going to take more than fake letters and Facebook posts and frivolous legal threats to tear down what he created. I drive to the building where the faucet needs fixing and spend an hour helping the maintenance guy replace the fixture. The tenant thanks me for coming so quickly and mentions she's been living there for 8 years and never had a landlord who cared this much. Her words stick with me for the rest of the day. Wednesday afternoon, I'm doing a maintenance walkthrough at one of my properties, checking smoke detectors and looking for any issues that need addressing. I walk out to the parking lot and freeze because Tony is there unloading moving boxes from a truck. He sees me and waves like everything is normal, like he's supposed to be here. I walk over and ask what he's doing. He says Christopher told him the apartment on the second floor is his, and he's moving in this weekend. I stare at him for a few seconds, trying to process the level of delusion required to think this is okay. I tell him clearly that he needs to leave the property right now or I'm calling the police for trespassing. He argues that Christopher promised him the apartment and I'm being unreasonable, and his brother wouldn't lie to him about something this important. I pull out my phone without saying anything else and start dialing 911 while maintaining direct eye contact. Tony's face changes when he realizes I'm serious. He loads his boxes back into the truck and leaves, but not before telling me I'm going to regret this. I sit in my car for a minute after Tony drives away, my hands shaking from adrenaline. Then I call the police non-emergency line and explain what just happened. An officer arrives 30 minutes later, and I give him Tony's full description, his truck details, and explain the whole harassment situation, including the upcoming restraining order hearing. The officer takes detailed notes and says he'll file a trespassing report and add it to the existing case file about the fake evictions. He agrees to have patrol cars drive by the property more often to watch for Tony coming back. He also mentions that this incident strengthens my case for the restraining order because it shows the harassment is escalating to physical presence at my properties. I thank him and drive home feeling shaky but glad I called instead of just letting it go. The restraining order hearing arrives on Tuesday morning, and I sit in the courthouse waiting room at 8:30, reviewing my notes and trying to calm my racing heart. I've got all my evidence organized in a folder, printed copies of everything Jillian said we might need. Jillian shows up at 8:45 looking professional and calm, which helps me feel slightly less like I'm going to throw up. She sits next to me and goes over everything one more time, reminding me to stick to facts, speak clearly, answer only what's asked, and not let Christopher's presence or his lawyer's questions rattle me. We walk into the courtroom at 9, and Christopher is already there with a different attorney than the one who sent the stupid demand letter. He's wearing a suit and tie, looking angry and self-righteous like he's the victim in all of this. His lawyer is a middle-aged woman in a gray suit who looks bored. The judge enters and we all stand, then sit back down when she tells us to. I testify first, and it takes about 20 minutes to walk through everything. I start with the broken engagement and Christopher's demand that I house his family for free in my rental properties. Then I go through the fake eviction notices sent to 5 of my tenants 2 days after the breakup, complete with forged signatures and fake letterhead. I present the housing complaint filed falsely claiming unsafe conditions, which the inspector found completely baseless. I show the access logs proving someone tried to hack my property management account multiple times. I present the cease and desist letter Jillian sent, and the text message Christopher sent me anyway, violating those terms. I show screenshots of Darlene's Facebook posts about me. I present the ridiculous legal demand letter claiming I owe Christopher money for emotional distress. Finally, I describe Tony showing up at my property with moving boxes last week, refusing to leave until I threatened to call the police. I hand over copies of police reports, inspection reports, forged letters, and documentation of the financial impact this harassment has caused. Christopher's attorney tries to suggest I'm making false accusations to hurt Christopher's reputation, but Jillian objects immediately, and the judge sustains it, looking clearly unimpressed with their defense strategy. Christopher testifies next and claims he never sent any fake eviction notices and has no control over what his family members do. He tries to distance himself from everything while also claiming I'm overreacting to normal post-breakup conflict. His testimony sounds weak and unconvincing because he can't explain the timing of everything happening right after our engagement ended. He can't explain why his brother showed up at my property thinking he had an apartment. He can't explain why his mother posted about me on Facebook. The judge asks him directly why he contacted me by text after being legally instructed not to, and he stumbles through some excuse about needing closure and not thinking the cease and desist applied to a simple text message. His lawyer tries to argue that there's no proof Christopher personally sent the fake letters or filed the false complaint, which is technically true but completely misses the obvious pattern. The judge looks skeptical during the whole thing, writing notes and occasionally glancing at me with an expression I can't quite read. The judge shuffles through the papers one more time and then looks directly at Christopher before addressing the courtroom. She grants a 1-year restraining order prohibiting Christopher from contacting me directly or indirectly, coming within 500 feet of my home or any of my properties, or making any posts about me on social media. Her voice is firm when she warns that any further harassment, including through family members, will be considered violation of the order and could result in criminal charges. Christopher's face goes pale and his lawyer puts a hand on his arm like she's worried he might say something stupid. I feel a wave of relief so strong I almost cry, but I hold it together until we're out of the courtroom. Jillian gathers her files quickly and we walk down the hallway toward the exit without speaking until we're outside. She walks me to my car in the parking garage and reminds me the restraining order is a tool, not a magic solution, so I need to stay alert and write down any violations immediately. She also mentions that the order puts Christopher's family on notice that continued harassment has real legal results, which should stop Darlene and Tony from further action. I thank her for everything she's done over the past month, and she tells me to call immediately if anything else happens. I drive home feeling lighter than I have in weeks, but also weirdly on edge, like I'm waiting for the next attack. Over the next few days, the harassment stops completely, and the sudden silence is almost weird after weeks of constant stress. No fake letters show up in my tenants' mailboxes. No social media posts appear about me. No trespassing incidents at my properties. No threatening emails in my inbox. I start to relax slightly, though I'm still checking my security cameras way too much and looking at my accounts for strange activity. Laurel comes over for dinner Wednesday night and reminds me that healing from this kind of constant harassment takes time, and I shouldn't expect to feel normal immediately. She's right, but I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. 4 days after the hearing, I receive an email from Rachel checking in and letting me know she had a serious talk with her mother about boundaries and legal results. Rachel says Darlene is angry about the restraining order, but understands she could face charges if she continues posting about me or pushing her sons to harass me. Rachel also mentions she's focusing on law school and staying away from her family's drama, which I respect and appreciate. I write back thanking her for reaching out and wishing her well with her studies. 3 weeks after the restraining order, I finally feel stable enough to deal with the vacancy created when one tenant chose to move out during the height of the chaos. I list the apartment at fair market rate and screen people carefully, checking references and employment history thoroughly. I select Isabella Ruiz, a teacher with great references and a stable job at the local middle school. She moves in smoothly, pays her deposit and first month's rent on time, and tells me she appreciates how well-maintained the building is. Having a good tenant fill that vacancy feels like closing one more chapter of the nightmare Christopher created. I also start working on the security and paperwork improvements suggested by Alden during his inspection. I create better systems for tracking maintenance requests, using a simple spreadsheet that logs the date, issue, action taken, and cost. I organize all my inspection reports into clearly labeled folders, both digital and physical. I update my lease files to include better documentation of tenant communication and payment history. The work is boring and takes hours, but it helps me feel more professional and ready for any future challenges. My father taught me the basics of property management, but I'm learning to take it to the next level with proper business systems. A month after the restraining order, I meet with my accountant to review the financial impact of everything that happened. We go through legal fees, security camera installation costs, rent credits to affected tenants, and time lost to dealing with harassment instead of normal business work. The total cost is about $8,000, which is a lot, but not devastating, and my rental income is stable enough to absorb it. My accountant suggests I build a larger emergency fund specifically for legal and security expenses going forward. She recommends treating it like insurance, setting aside money every month so I'm prepared if anything similar happens again. I leave her office with a clear plan and homework to research business insurance policies. That week, I start setting aside an additional $500 monthly into a separate business account designated for legal defense and security costs. I treat it like insurance against future problems, money I hope to never use but need to have available. The discipline of regular savings helps me feel more secure and prepared, honoring my father's careful financial planning while adapting to challenges he never had to face. I also spend several evenings researching business insurance policies that might cover harassment or fraud-related losses. Most standard landlord insurance doesn't cover this stuff, but I find a few specialized policies worth considering. 2 months after the restraining order, I receive a letter from Christopher's attorney requesting change of the order to allow limited communication about dividing shared wedding deposits. My stomach drops when I see the return address, but I call Jillian immediately instead of opening it alone. She tells me to scan and send it to her, which I do within minutes. Jillian calls back an hour later saying all such communication can happen through attorneys, and we respond declining any change but offering to help with financial settlements through legal channels only. Christopher's attorney agrees, and we arrange for the return of my portion of deposits without any direct contact. The wedding vendor refunds total about $3,000, less than I'd hoped but more than nothing. I deposit the money into my emergency fund and feel a sense of completion I didn't expect. Closing out these final financial ties to Christopher feels like dropping weight I didn't realize I was still carrying around. I delete his contact information from my phone, block him on all social media platforms I use, and file the legal documents in a box labeled Closed Cases in my home office. I stand in my office looking at that box on the shelf and realize this chapter is actually finished now. The next Saturday morning, I meet Rachel at a coffee shop downtown, sliding into the booth across from her while she's already working on a latte. She looks different somehow, more confident maybe, and she tells me law school is going really well. She's decided to focus on family law after watching everything that happened with her family and mine, seeing how legal systems can either protect people or fail them completely. She apologizes again for how her mom and brothers acted, saying she's embarrassed by the whole thing and hopes I don't think badly of her because of them. I tell her I appreciate her integrity through all of it, that she was the only one who acted like an actual decent person when things got ugly. We agree to stay in friendly contact without any pressure to be close or pretend we're family, just two people who respect each other and might grab coffee sometimes. She asks how the properties are doing, and I tell her everything's stable now, tenants are happy, and I'm actually enjoying the work again instead of dreading every phone call. We finish our coffee and hug goodbye in the parking lot, both of us knowing this is probably the last real connection either of us will have to that whole mess with Christopher. 3 months after the restraining order, Laurel shows up at my condo on a Friday afternoon and tells me we're taking a weekend trip to the coast. I start to protest about having too much work, but she cuts me off, saying I haven't taken a real break since this nightmare started, and I need to get away from the properties and the legal stress for a couple days. We throw clothes in bags and drive 3 hours to a small beach cottage she found online, this tiny place right near the water with big windows and a porch overlooking the sand. We spend Saturday walking along the beach with our shoes off, feeling the cold water on our feet, and not talking about Christopher or properties or restraining orders at all. We eat fresh seafood at a little restaurant in town, the kind of place where everything tastes like butter and salt in the ocean. That night, I sleep 9 hours straight without waking up once to check my security cameras or worry about what harassment might be coming next. And when I wake up Sunday morning, I realize how much stress I've been holding in my shoulders and neck and jaw without even knowing it. My whole body feels lighter somehow, like I've been carrying around a 100-pound weight that finally got lifted off. When I get back home Sunday night, I feel mentally clearer and more settled than I have since Evan spotted me at my property and started this whole chain of events by telling Christopher about my rental income. I'm not grateful for what happened, not even close, but I'm proud of how I handled it all. I protected my tenants when Christopher wanted me to kick them out for his family. I defended my father's legacy when they tried to treat his life's work like free housing they were entitled to. I set firm boundaries even when it meant ending my engagement and dealing with months of harassment. I used legal systems the right way, getting restraining orders and police reports instead of just hoping the problem would go away. I proved to myself that I can manage serious challenges without giving up my values or letting people pressure me into doing things I know are wrong. That week, I scheduled individual meetings with my long-term tenants, starting with Mrs. Smith and Megan. I want to thank them for their patience during all the chaos and get their honest feedback about how I handled everything. Mrs. Smith invites me into her apartment and makes tea, the way she always does, and tells me she was never worried because she could see I was protecting everyone. She says my transparency during the crisis actually made her trust me more, not less, because I treated them like real people instead of just income sources. Megan says basically the same thing when I meet her for lunch, that most landlords would have hidden the harassment and left tenants wondering what was happening. But I kept everyone informed and made sure they knew their leases were safe. The Johnsons send me an email saying they appreciate how I fought to keep them in their home when Christopher's family wanted their unit. Rob tells me he respects how I stood up to people trying to take advantage of me. Mrs. Smith walks me to her door when I'm leaving and puts her hand on my arm, looking me right in the eye. Your father would be so proud of how you protected his buildings and the community he created here, she says, and I have to blink back tears because that's exactly what I needed to hear. 4 months after the restraining order, I establish a formal tenant advisory committee with Megan as chair, Rob handling communications and representatives from 2 other buildings I own. We'll meet every 3 months to discuss property issues, upcoming maintenance needs, and any concerns people have about the buildings or management. The structure creates real accountability and gives tenants a direct voice in how things are run, which benefits everyone. It also helps me feel less isolated as a young property owner, managing my father's legacy alone, because now I have a group of people invested in making these buildings work well. The first meeting happens on a Tuesday evening in the community room of the main building. 7 people show up and we spend 2 hours going through current maintenance projects, plans for building improvements, and ideas for community events like a summer barbecue. Everyone is positive and engaged, offering suggestions and volunteering to help coordinate things. I leave that meeting feeling like I'm building something real here, not just collecting rent checks, but actually creating a community the way my father always intended. I use part of my rental income to make upgrades I've been putting off for too long. I hire painters to do fresh coats in all the hallways, replacing the dingy beige with a clean light gray that makes everything look newer. I install new lighting fixtures in common areas, the kind with motion sensors so they're not running all night wasting electricity. I order updated mailboxes with better security locks after some tenants mentioned concerns about mail theft. I pay a landscaping company to clean up the gardens at 2 properties, pulling weeds and planting some flowers and trimming the bushes that had gotten overgrown. The whole project costs about $8,000, which makes me wince when I write the checks, but the results are immediate. The buildings look cared for instead of neglected. Several tenants stop me to comment on how nice everything looks, and I feel like I'm finally moving forward, instead of just defending against attacks from Christopher's family. 5 months after the restraining order, I attend a local property owners association meeting after seeing a flyer at the hardware store. I walk into a community center conference room where about 20 people are sitting around talking about contractor recommendations and tenant screening procedures. I introduce myself as someone who recently inherited 6 buildings and is still figuring everything out, and people immediately start offering advice and sharing their experiences. I meet other small landlords who own just a few properties like me, not big corporate operations, but regular people trying to provide good housing and make a living. I realize I've been so isolated in my approach, trying to figure everything out alone, when there's actually a whole community of people doing similar work who are happy to help. I joined the association officially that night, paying the yearly membership fee and signing up for their email list. I start attending the monthly meetings regularly, learning something new each time. Through the Property Owners Association, I learn about better insurance options that cover more than my current basic policy. I learn about property management software that would streamline my rent collection and maintenance tracking, instead of the messy spreadsheet system I've been using. I learn strategies for building long-term tenant relationships that reduce turnover and keep good people in my buildings for years. I implement several suggestions over the next few weeks, switching to new software that saves me hours of administrative work each month. The business feels more sustainable and less overwhelming when I have actual systems in place instead of just reacting to whatever comes up. At one meeting, I meet a woman named Kendall who recently inherited 3 buildings from her parents and is dealing with family members who think they should get free apartments. I volunteered to mentor her through it, meeting for coffee and sharing everything I learned about protecting assets and managing family pressure. Helping her actually helps me process my own experience, turning something painful into something useful. 6 months after the restraining order, my life has settled into a new normal that feels stable and purposeful. My rental income comes in consistently every month, right around $12,000 like it always has. My tenants are happy and my buildings are in better shape than when this whole thing started. My security systems are solid with cameras at every building and good documentation procedures. I have professional support networks through my attorney Jillian and the Property Owners Association. I still check my security cameras regularly and maintain careful documentation of everything, but the constant worry has faded to reasonable caution. I'm sleeping well again, eating normal meals instead of stress snacking, and actually enjoying property management work instead of dreading every tenant call. I visit my father's grave on the anniversary of his death, bringing flowers and sitting on the grass next to his headstone. I tell him everything that happened this year, the whole story from start to finish. I tell him about Christopher discovering the properties and demanding his family get free housing. I tell him about ending the engagement and the harassment that followed, the fake eviction notices and false complaints and months of legal battles. I tell him about the restraining order and how everything finally stopped. Most importantly, I tell him how I protected his legacy, keeping his buildings and his tenants safe when people tried to exploit what he built. I feel his presence in the well-maintained buildings he left me, in the stable community of tenants who trust me to treat them fairly, in the financial security his careful work over 30 years provided. I promise him I'll continue honoring his values of fair treatment and quality maintenance, and building community through affordable housing that regular people can actually afford. I promise I'll keep learning and improving, but never compromise on the principles he taught me about treating tenants like human beings and taking pride in providing good homes. I sit there for a long time watching the sun move across the grass, feeling peaceful in a way I haven't felt since before Evan spotted me at that property, and everything fell apart. My father built something solid and good, and I protected it when people tried to take it from me. That's worth everything. 6 months after the restraining order, Laurel and I sit across from each other at our favorite Italian restaurant downtown, the one with the red checkered tablecloths and garlic bread that arrives warm in a basket. She raises her wine glass and tells me she's impressed by how I handled everything. She points out I could have given in to Christopher's demands just to avoid conflict. I could have sold the properties to escape the stress. I could have let the harassment break me down until I couldn't function. Instead, I stood firm and built something stronger than what existed before. Her words make me see my own growth in a way I hadn't fully recognized while living through it. I protected my father's legacy while also protecting myself, and that took more strength than I gave myself credit for. The next week, I sit at my home office desk with a blank spreadsheet open and start drafting a comprehensive business plan for the next 5 years. I map out maintenance schedules for each building, noting when major systems like roofs and HVAC units will need replacement. I create capital improvement budgets accounting for upgrades that will increase property values while keeping rents affordable. I outline rent adjustment strategies that balance fair market rates with tenant retention. I even sketch out expansion possibilities, researching neighborhoods where distressed properties might become available. The planning process shifts something in how I see these buildings. They're not just my father's legacy anymore. They're my business that I'm actively building and improving. I'm not simply maintaining what he created. I'm developing it further while staying true to his core values of quality housing and fair treatment. The distinction matters more than I expected. 7 months after the restraining order, I receive an email from Jillian forwarding a brief message from Christopher's attorney. Christopher has accepted a job opportunity in another state and will be relocating within the month. The information is provided as a courtesy update regarding the restraining order's geographic enforcement. I read the message 3 times, processing what it means. He's physically distant now, rebuilding his life somewhere else entirely, and I'm doing the same here with the solid foundation my father provided. The closure feels different from I expected, quieter and more final. There's no dramatic confrontation or last conversation. He's just gone, moving forward with his life while I move forward with mine. I'm sitting in my home office reviewing tenant feedback emails and updated financial projections when something shifts in my chest. Mrs. Smith sent a note thanking me for the quick response to her leaky faucet. The Johnsons mentioned they're signing another year lease because they love the neighborhood. Rob's business is doing well enough that he asked about renting a second unit for office space. My spreadsheets show steady income, manageable expenses, and a healthy emergency fund. I realize I'm genuinely happy with my life right now. I have meaningful work managing properties that provide quality housing for real families. I have strong relationships with tenants who respect what I'm building. I have professional support systems through Jillian and the Property Owners Association that help me handle challenges. I have personal friendships with Laurel and others that keep me grounded and supported. Christopher's attempt to exploit my inheritance ended up teaching me exactly how strong and capable I actually am. I'm grateful for the clarity that came from standing firm on my boundaries and protecting my values, even when the cost was high and the fight was exhausting. My father built something worth protecting, and I proved I could do exactly that.